Hello again. This is our third demonstration session regarding the use of EyA's APIs. In this session, we're going to review how to use asset API calls, including how to manage them, how to create some associations, QR codes, set asset history, and so on. As you may remember, the first thing that we have to do is log in to the EyA service. Firstly, we send a token request to the KeyCloak server, and it will provide us an access token, which is automatically stored inside our Postman environment and set as an execution header to all further requests. To manage assets, we have this assets endpoint. This operation allows us to query and retrieve the list of assets and various filtering parameters and returned as a pageable structure. Here is a full list of assets with some basic information which allows you to verify attributes of assets and so on. Now we're going to create some new assets. I have to change its name to validate a new entity. You can provide a different set of attributes here. Our Swagger documentation contains the full set of attributes, the full structure of the asset, and attributes that can be provided. To create an asset, we have to provide the actual template that will be used to generate the asset structure. We will use one of the API templates that we have cloned previously, so only company templates are available to create assets from. Now all of the required information is set, and we can create an asset. We see our success status 201 created. We now also have our asset identifier. We can use the get process to check our newly created asset structure. As you can see, here is our asset and some general information and asset structure with data differences from the asset template. The asset template has an attribute structure, so some description of an attribute structure are populated. Here is the view of the created attributes. It has some real values, some options, and so on. This value is a default value, which is specified in the asset template. Also, we are able to perform an update operation in the same way. Like for our templates, we just copy the response from GET request and provide it in the body of the PUT request. We have to specify some values that we would like to update within the asset. Let's replace the default value with another test value. Also, we have to replace the identifier inside the URL, and we can push the PUT request. Here the 204 response code tells us that the request succeeded. Now let's check that our value was updated correctly. Let's perform a get operation, and we will see that our value now has the new value, so it's correct. After that, we have to publish the asset to make it usable. So we can publish the asset in the same manner as we did for the templates. If you would like to perform any operation based on this asset, you have to publish it first. We will need an asset identifier, and we will provide it inside the asset publish URL address. Here we have a 200 OK status returned from the put request. If we now execute a get operation, we can find here that it was published successfully. Also, we're able to retrieve some asset history. This history shows us how the asset is stored and updated inside the EyA organization node. So actually it is the chain of blocks corresponding to the asset. We can see that we have a first issue of the created asset. After that, we have performed an update operation. And this last state has unconsumed status, which means that we are able to update it. So to create the next block in the chain, based on this one, and the consumed blocks are not allowed to be updated. It is actually impossible in terms of blockchain technology. So let's move on. We have generated a QR code operation. This is also described in our Swagger documentation. It returns fine and we have the QR code available. Let's now discuss asset associations and their operations. To create an association between two assets, we need these asset endpoints. First, we need to get the list of assets that can be used to create the association. We have to modify the source asset identifier inside the URL and then send this request. We see the list of assets that can be used for the association operation. Now let's perform the asset association request. We need to put the target asset identifier and source asset identifier inside the URL. We can also specify the location where the assets are associated. We have no content message requirement message. In the next step, we can retrieve all the associations of our assets to make sure that association was created and it is stored inside the EyA chain. So here we have the full detailed information about the asset association. This includes the target asset location, date, when the assets were associated, and the parent-child relationship between the assets. So if you check, for example, the associations of the asset, we will receive the dataset, which will be slightly different. So let's check it. Yes, we have the parent files and our asset is associated correctly. Also, we are able to retrieve the association history. We have to define our main asset inside the URL. And here we see that the association was created, it wasn't removed, and all the information about the association is there. Also, it is possible to query the association or to check if an association exists between two assets. Firstly, we need to retrieve the identifiers of these assets, namely the first and second one. Here is our association according to the provided URL parameters. And also it is providing the history of a single asset attribute. Using Swagger, you can find some additional features to update a single attribute. a list of attributes, and so on. So let's take our asset. Its identifier is here. We need to provide the asset's unique identifier first, and then secondly, you have to provide the attribute identifier. So let's check the GET request. Its tab category and attributes are provided, and we can see that this is here. Now let's take its identifier and perform a put to retrieve the history through the URL. We can see that the asset attribute was issued, then it was updated, published, and finally an association was issued for this asset. Thank you for watching this technical series. Goodbye.